trolling Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat. Two victims of this tell CNN they were so afraid of the online attacks they faced, they don't even want us to describe the circumstances for fear it would start up again. They both just questioned the politics of Bernie Sanders in a public setting, and their personal lives were exposed and attacked.
Well, just what Nick said, I think that's right. I mean, there is no Democratic establishment anymore. There's not even a Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is a meaningless notion that the party, like the Republican Party, has been hollowed out and privatized to a large extent. There are Democratic elites, and so when we're talking about the Democratic establishment, we're really talking about a bunch of people that Nick also knows well, which really means Democratic donors.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
The election in 2020, without hyperbole, is going to be the most important election this country has undergone in over 100 years. Not a joke.
This November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my lifetime, and that includes when I was on the ballot.
There are just 8 days left in what is the most important election of our lifetime.
Where did you guys come to a conclusion about why Clinton had such a hard time just owning that she did something wrong with the email server?
You know, I know that Russia and other forces would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want. They want us to have a debate about the internal structure of Hillary's campaign, what's true, what's not true. And I'm just not going to play that. I'm sorry.
Yes, we came, we saw, we died.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It's like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
You know, people have said, if you look at, for example, the heat that ended up around the bend the knee of Colin Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. Many smart people have said it actually was not a threat. The Russian bots started taking out. Yes.
But I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
this
be
is
running.
Not about.
If you're like me, one of the millions suffering from pain caused by migraine, Nurtec ODT may help. It's the only medication that can treat a migraine when it strikes and prevent migraine attacks.
Trump and the Republicans lose on Tuesday, and if they lose badly, it's not going to be because of the left, whatever that means. It's not because the 50 Antifa black mask guys who roam around the United States breaking windows and committing mayhem, most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Rudy Giuliani, there's only three things he mentioned in a sentence: a noun and a verb and 9/11. I mean,
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
And I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out.
and now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. If we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
I can't do it.
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, it is so great to be back with you today. Tonight.
Oh, I am so glad you are here.
Yo, we here now. Stupid.
What's your name, scumbag?
Oh, we got a lot to talk about. Watching my intro as I was getting prepped for this, I that opening clip of the guy talking about people being scared of Bernie Sanders supporters, and a lot of the people who watch me will remember or watch this stream or jump on are part of that era, the Bernie Sanders movement, and it just took me back seeing him say that stuff, like calling Pete Buttigieg a rat and Elizabeth Warren a snake, and it made me just kind of, reminisce on the whole last, 10 years or so of politics and how you really do have to be a dick if you want to change anything. And that kind of explains a lot of the machinations of the Trump administration. Like, you're going to piss people off, and the, kind of collective outrage in response to anything changing is like that CNN article. Oh my God, Bernie Sanders supporters are so mean. They called me names because I'm a fake, they called Elizabeth Warren a snake because she lied and said he was a misogynist on behalf of her donors, is how they would have phrased that if they were being honest. But we all know that they're not being honest. And speaking of not being honest, we have a lot to get into tonight. I think David Pakman here could be the mascot of Shilldom, the mascot of the mayor of Shillville. From here forward, I will refer to David Pakman as the mayor of Shillville.
What's your name, scumbag?
But we're going to start tonight with some internet drama that's been going on. And it involves two of my favorite journalists, Glenn Greenwald and Whitney Webb. And so I just want to start by showing you how this came to my attention. Let me just pull this down for a second and talk to you for a second here, because I think this is important. Glenn Greenwald is one of the few journalists I respect and trust. That's not to say I just blindly believe everything the guy says, but he has a long track record of being against the grain. And when I say against the grain, what I mean there is telling the truth when it's not going to behoove him. It's not going to benefit him in any way. It's not going to make people happy with him. The Russiagate thing, I think, and COVID, frankly, are very good barometers for this, because you really saw who was real and who was not during the pandemic, right? You really saw anyone who pushed that, not like, oh, people who don't get the vax should die. Like, fuck all those people for real with a nightstick. But there were, and I've said this before, there were some people who I think begrudgingly went along with it, even though they were still kind of skeptical. And anyone who came out after the fact and said, hey, look, I was wrong. I should have been more skeptical, peace be with them. But Glenn Greenwald is one of those people who I feel like, throughout the last 10 years of politics, the Russiagate thing is another good example where he could have been a good little doggy like the rest of the media and gone like, yes, of course, Trump is a secret Russian spy. We all know that. We just don't have the evidence to convict him on it. But he wasn't. And same with Taibbi, and they face, Taibbi used to appear regularly on Bill Maher and Rachel Maddow. until that incident, until he went against the grain on that one thing. And it's funny, again, going back to my intro, there's a clip in there of Jonathan Capehart crying to a cop who wrote a book about January 6th because he was there, and Jonathan Capehart was like, "Thank you for what you did that day. You saved America." That type of thing is why these people cannot ever let go of the mythologies that they've spun for the last 10 years, because they've made themselves look ridiculous. And if you go back and see Jonathan Capehart crying to the January 6th cop, and then you review the actual surveillance footage and see there was plenty of people in there that day that didn't vandalize and were peaceful. There were also law enforcement elements involved with riling people up. It's pretty obvious that this guy's book and everything around it is a fraud. And so they can't let go of that stuff. But with the Glenn Greenwald and the Whitney Webb thing, these are two people that I have a ton of respect for. And Whitney, I mean, she does her homework. She's one of those people who it's hard to kind of explain how much credibility she has with me anyway, because I just feel like she really goes into the weeds and really backs up all of her claims. Or if she can't back it up, is kind of honest about it and is like, with the Epstein stuff, she's kind of like, hey, here's the evidence. Here are a couple of possible scenarios. She's always very deliberative with that stuff. So let's get this started. Let me show you this clip of Glenn Greenwald that really got my attention, where he's answering like a viewer mailbag question about Whitney Webb. And I did speed these up a little bit so they're not as laborious.
Can you please clarify your view of Whitney Webb's work? Are you of the opinion that she is a misguided, honest broker of journalism, or she is malicious and the errors you claim are, quote, unhinged? I've looked closely at everything cited by you and Tracy as errors and found the claims to have as much merit as Mehdi Hassan badgering Taibbi for having misspoke. Do you just not like her as a person? I have followed her for 7 years or so after I heard her on Tim Dillon's old podcast, and I found her to be genuine in her beliefs. So, there have been times I've listened to Whitney Webb. She's clearly a very smart person. She's very well spoken. I think she's very diligent. She doesn't just speak off the cuff. I think she really does a lot of work on the areas that she covers. My problem with Whitney Webb is, and I think this is I think understandable, is you have this experience where you can read or assess media reports and feel like this seems propagandistic. I can identify errors here or deceitful passages. And, you're kind of pretty sure that that's the case, but you're not 100% sure. But then there are times when you're in the news and when people are writing about you. And so you have firsthand knowledge of what is actually happening. So if somebody's writing things about you and what you've done and what's being done that is false, you don't have any doubts about the fact that what's being written is false. And there were a lot of articles that she wrote when we first created The Intercept, in our reporting on the Snowden archive, that were just simply fabricated and made up and false, just insanely conspiratorial. I mean, she believed and often asserted that Pierre Omidyar paid us $250 million because he was tied to the deep state and he was trying to privatize the Snowden archive in order to prevent it from being...
Okay, right there. There's a little bit of something. Pierre Omidyar paid us $250 million. Already, you're on some shit. But let him finish, because... I know that Glenn's motives are good, but that doesn't really take away from what Whitney Webb is saying about the people who funded The Intercept. I really don't think it does.
Disclose further. This was so moronic for so many reasons. Pierre Omidyar didn't invest $250 million in The Intercept. He invested that in his big, broad media company, of which The Intercept was a small part.
But Glenn, why do you think people like Pierre Omidyar invest in media companies like that, or media holding companies, or media groups that funnel that money out to institutions like The Intercept? Why do you think they do that, Glenn? So they can attempt to control your messaging, of course. But
we went to The Intercept. There were only two people on the planet who had control of the full archive, myself and Laura Poitras. So nobody could decide what could and couldn't be disclosed. He had no way to try and suppress things from from that he and his CIA friends wanted suppressed. I knew this for a fact. He never even attempted to exert the slightest amount of influence in the reporting that we were doing about anything, let alone the Snowden reporting. Never once any attempt by him or anyone associated with him.
Okay, but Glenn, you quit The Intercept because why? Because they wouldn't let you be critical of Biden, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm not processing that memory the way I should be, but that's the way I remember it. Glenn Greenwald quit The Intercept and went solo on Rumble because they wouldn't let him report on what he wanted to report on, which kind of, related to the Snowden stuff. Maybe it's not exactly how Whitney Webb said it was, but just based on Glenn's own experience, it sounds like she might have been kind of onto something. Call me crazy.
Influence it, let alone pay money to hide documents that were incriminating, as though we would do that to Snowden, as though Snowden would know that was happening and not object, even though he gave up his life. The whole thing was so idiotic. But the kind of conspiracy theory that if you don't know anything, it seems, like maybe you should believe it. Like, hey, there's this billionaire here and he does have ties to,
So like even in this, he's like being very dismissive of her, but
defense contractors, like almost every billionaire does. And why did he invest all this money in a media outlet? Probably because he wants to buy the Snowden archive for himself, have it as his private property, and then prevent it from being disclosed. None of that happened. It just didn't happen. And it didn't matter how often I demonstrated that, how often I said it. You can find so many. So for me, the first encounter that I had with her, and obviously this is going to shape your perception, is not that she just once made a mistake or once wrote an article that was kind of off base. It's that she wrote continuously articles based on assertions of conspiracy theories that I knew firsthand and know to this day firsthand are just made up, like untrue, demonstrably false. And obviously, if you're the subject of those kind of articles by one particular person, again, many over the course of several years, you're going to end up being quite skeptical of the rest of the work that they've done.
Yeah, she reported critically on him, so he sees her through that lens. That makes sense.
It doesn't mean that I discount the rest of what she's done. I have nothing against her personally. I don't know her personally. I never really had any personal interactions with her. Maybe once I did, that was initiated by me saying something negative about her work, and it might have been acrimonious. I don't even remember if that's true. I honestly don't have anything personal against her. But it did sour me to the rest of what she's done, even though, as I've said, I've read things that she's written over the years. I've heard her on other shows and interviews. I've often found her, like a diligent analyst, like a very smart and insightful journalist. So yes. It doesn't mean that everything she does is contaminated by these falsehoods that she created, what is it now, 10 years ago, 9 years ago. But obviously it's going to affect how I see her, and it's going to color how I view the things she says and how I assess them. As far as this, I really haven't commented on Whitney Webb. Other than that, I really don't go around like impugning her work. Michael Tracy just wrote a long article because Michael's, at war with everybody who thinks the Epstein case is anything more than one guy who might have done a few bad things with a few underage girls. I don't want to characterize what Michael's view are, but that's how I understand it, that he thinks this whole broader conspiracy is completely made up and sensationalized and fabulous.
So I have to say, I don't agree with Michael Tracy on this, but I will say this about Michael Tracy. I have been very upset with him in the past because he's reported on things like Bernie Sanders in ways that I didn't like, or I didn't said things that I didn't want to hear, but he was right a lot of time. I'm not saying he's right about this by any stretch. I don't know enough, but it seems like the genesis of this kind of rift between Whitney Webb and Glenn is based on Michael Tracy, because Michael Tracy works with Glenn.
And she's one of the people who've been pushing what he considers the more sensationalist part of that story, including his connection to Israeli intelligence, including who was involved in this plot. And so he wrote a long article purporting to debunk what she said. I read the article. I found some of what Michael wrote persuasive. The thing that disappointed me the most was that she kept saying, and her fans kept saying, she'll debate anybody, but Michael kept asking her to debate, and she said no. Maybe she has personal issues. Maybe she doesn't regard Michael as a good faith actor. I don't know. So I don't want to be lumped in with Michael or be treated as some like Whitney Webb hater. I'm not. My only view of Whitney Webb is based on the firsthand knowledge that I had from her. I kind of just moved away from Mint Press and from her writing in the years that followed. And like I said, there are times I've seen her write things on Israel and the U.S. relationship with Israel, the war in Gaza, the Democratic Party, various policies of Trump that I agree with, that I think have been persuasive, that have added positive things to the discourse and conversation. But I don't know that I'll ever be able to, find her to be one of my favorite sources to turn to based on what I know she did
for
those 2 or 3 years. It just went on and on and on.
So let's move over to Whitney's response in her side of the story. So she chimed in after this, and she said, "Glenn, I find it very inaccurate that you would claim that I lied about you, your Snowden reporting, or really about you at all, as the articles and theories you are referencing or referring to are reports about the Intercept," which again, I said, Glenn left the Intercept because they wouldn't let him report on what he wanted to report on. So anyway, let me finish this. How many of the whistleblowers who trusted the Intercept ended up in prison, some of whom thanks directly to other Intercept journalists they trusted, and how the Snowden archive was closed. Laura Poitras, who you mentioned in this video, was outraged about the archive being shuttered and said you and top staff did not even inform Snowden that it was being shut down. I'm obviously aware that your underling, Michael Tracy, has made 2 very bad faith smears against me and other researchers in the Epstein case recently, taking 2 relatively minor errors I had already taken corrective action on to try and discredit my 10-year body of work. Among other things, I can assure you that those mistakes are extremely rare in my work and they are not present in my articles on the Intercept. The content of which you paint as containing things that are provably false, I am posting links to all of my articles on the issue below. Please let me know what is provably false about them, and I will happily make a correction. Also, I'm hardly the only journalist to have made these claims about the Snowden archive and the Intercept. Why are you singling me out? So right now, Whitney, the ball kind of looks like it's in her hands. And again, I love Glenn Greenwald, so this is hard for me to stomach, but so here Whitney Webb says, WikiLeaks, who you voted to defund at FPF, tweeted, by the way, are you going to get on their case? In the past, this was your response to suggestions that Omidyar may have influenced the Intercept's handling of the Snowden archive, even a tiny bit. So here's WikiLeaks post. The Intercept, First Look Media Inc., controlled and funded by eBay PayPal billionaire Pierre Omidyar, shuts down Snowden archive publishing after revealing less than 10% after 5 years. Guardian WAPO even less. Complaint by Laura Poitras to CEO Michael Boone, HT. So as I've communicated to you and Betsy, I'm sickened by your decision to eliminate the research. So right now, Whitney looks like she's kind of in the right here, if I'm to use a term. So I do also want to show you this. And because this is kind of how I felt when this broke out. Let's grow up and get along. This is Brock's Brizzle for Rizzle, I guess. You know how Twitter rolls. All these great handles. I like you both. You seem to know more about certain things that are more hidden or dark, which I love. He seems a little more mainstream, but also has stuff that I like too. We all get things wrong. You owned up to it, which is what matters. I have every right to defend my work and integrity from attacks. So then it gets into the debate me, bro type stuff. Glenn says, I didn't single you out. We do a Q&A with our audience, and someone asked my views of you, so I explained them. If it was far more nuanced than you want to claim, but you refused to debate Michael Tracy on his claims, so again, feel free to come on my show. Michael Tracy chimes in, Whitney, if your claim is that I've only made bad faith smears against you for making up facts to insinuate that Trump orchestrated a prison murder to conceal his complicity in child sex trafficking crimes, why won't you agree to debate? Let's do it anytime, anywhere. I don't know that she insinuated that, but... So then Yusuf Ibrahim chimes in, and he says, I'm a fan of you both. Go on his show. Make sure the little Zionist page Shill M. Tracy is there too. The linguist can take notes for his handlers in Israel. Try to get Snowden via Zoom and to hash this all out for me. Please ask Glenn what really caused the rift between him. I should have got the whole thing. So here's Michael Tracy kind of going at Whitney Webb. Disclaimer, I don't use jargon propaganda terms such as genocide, terrorism, ethnic cleansing. If you prefer to communicate in the language of activist sloganeering, that's your prerogative. It's not to excuse any side. I just prefer clear English. That's why Yusuf is calling him the linguist. So it's I think at the end of the day, he's right. Whitney does need to go on Glenn's show and have an kind of an open debate with him or a talk with him directly, because I think they're on the same page for the most part, and it's like this weird, dicey kind of. I feel like Whitney gets really defensive too, as she should, because she did a lot of the hard research that people are quoting, like Ian Carroll was doing on Rogan's show. But I want to show you, just to kind of close this out, what Whitney recently said on Sabby's show, because there's a couple little nuggets in here that we need to touch on. So let's
an appearance by Ian Carroll on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about your work. And I have had this question for quite some time. Why haven't you been on to Joe Rogan's podcast?
So this is one thing, and I'm speculating, but I think Joe Rogan has to read her book before he's going to just invite her on. He needs to read the book and make judgment. And it sounds like it's a pretty vast book, but also it doesn't seem like Whitney Webb really wants to do that, and she lives out of the country, so I'm sure there's more to it than just like, oh, Rogan doesn't want her on. I give Rogan the benefit of the doubt in this, but let's listen to what she has to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've been name dropped on there by Rogan and other people and have not been invited on. And I mean, obviously it's fine. I don't need to go on there. But I found it strange that, he would have another person on to talk about my book. That's not me. And I would argue, again, this is speculative, but I would argue that, the fact that I don't really like either party is very inconvenient to some large platforms. And so, instead, a person that, promoted my research, which, thanks for doing that, but that promoted my research, but their solution, unlike mine, is to vote Trump. I think that.
So I don't know. I don't really like that, because it's kind of like, I think with someone like Rogan, there's a lot of good reasons to vote for Trump. Let me put it that way. The speech thing being one, but we're going to get into how that's already been flipped on its head in a little while. But also, I think if anything, there was the reason to vote for Trump was just out of spite for the Democrats. Like I said, with the Bernie movement, the first clip in my intro where the CNN guy's talking about how mean Bernie supporters were to people, calling them snakes and rats and everything. That's what you have to do to win, and fuck those people who complain about it, because they're trying to cling to power, and they're going to call you every name in the book and smear you as a Nazi or a racist or a Russian or anti-vax or whatever they can do to keep you from changing anything. And so it's kind of like, I see the world through that angry aggro lens, where it's like, look, polite discourse in politics doesn't work. Or Obama would have actually changed things and fixed healthcare. It doesn't work. And both parties, as Whitney's mentioning here, both parties are guilty. So it is a lesser of two evil things. And, definitely in this cycle, Trump was the lesser of two evils. Whether she believes that or not, I don't think Rogan thinks it's a solution. I don't think anyone thinks it's a solution. Electoral politics haven't solved shit for anyone in decades. So, if ever.
It's more convenient. It's a more convenient package for my research than perhaps what I would say. And also in that appearance, Ian Carroll, even though he promoted my book, said that my work on Peter Thiel and Palantir was unhinged, was the term that.
No, that's not what he said. He said it can come off that way because you go so freakishly into detail. And I mean, maybe that wasn't the best word to use, because that's the only thing anyone heard. Because she's written tomes on the Epstein case, more than anyone probably. So yeah, that does seem like that's, again, maybe it's like a better, I could go to let's go to the thesaurus real quick and see what a good alternate word for unhinged might be. How about, let's see. Deranged, demented, out of one's mind. It's not a good word. Manic, berserk, disturbed, distracted, confused. Yeah, poor choice of words. But he didn't say it was unhinged either. He said it comes off as unhinged. So, by the same token, he says in the interview, he brought the book for Joe Rogan in a backpack. He makes reference to it and says you should have her on the show because she knows much more about the subject than he does. Anyway, let her continue.
He used. Without really explaining so. And it's kind of ironic that he would do that because for being such a big fan of my book, at the end of the book, I talk about how Palantir is the new Jeffrey Epstein. And in the age of Palantir, you do not need someone like Jeffrey Epstein or any other figure in history that engaged in sex blackmail. You don't need to do that kind of operation anymore. You can just either harvest all of the data you would need for blackmail off of people's digital devices, or you plant things on their devices that are incriminating but don't actually belong to them.
Do you think?
And Peter Thiel and Epstein had a significant relationship. More has come out about it, from mainstream sources in the past few months. I first wrote about their overlap in 2019. And so, it's been part of my work on Epstein for a long time. And I don't really think you can separate my work on Peter Thiel and Epstein, to be honest.
So what she's saying here, it makes a lot of sense why there is such a rush to dismiss the Epstein thing, because if Peter Thiel is connected to him, Peter Thiel basically bankrolled, he's one of the Silicon Valley guys who bankrolled the Trump victory. So, these people are going to defend their donor, of course. But also the thing about Whitney is, she says in there something like, it's kind of odd that he brought someone else on his show to discuss my book. Well, no, Whitney, that's not what happened. He didn't bring Ian on your show to discuss your book. Ian discussed your book because he likes your book and got a lot of valuable information from it, and was actually, I think doing you a solid by promoting it and talking about you on the show. The podcast has like 4 million views already. So, he put your name out to that audience, which you should be thankful for. And if you're pissed that someone else is going on Rogan's show and discussing your book, why don't you reach out to Rogan's people and say, hey, look, I wrote a book. If Joe's interested, I'd love to talk to him. Why don't you go on there and discuss it with him firsthand, or answer the call when he finally does call, if he does. Maybe I'm giving Rogan too much credit, but he doesn't seem like the type of guy that would just dismiss her. And when he's ready to dive into, he's not afraid to dive into stuff like that, clearly. So, anyway, I hope that I hope that Whitney, I got Laura Poitras on the brain. I hope that Whitney takes the initiative to go on Glenn's show. And, Michael Tracy, again, it's like, I may not agree with him on with his takes on this particular subject, but we need people like Michael Tracy. He's the fucking malcontent. He's the guy when everyone's like, it's like this, who's like, nah, maybe it's not. We need those kind of people, even if he's wrong. Take him to court and prove him wrong. But that's a real journalist, like a shit kicker, shit stirrer, shit kicker, cowboy journalist, shit kicking. Yeah. No, but anyway, Glenn and Whitney, I beg of you to clean it up. Do a 2-hour long interview, Glenn, with Whitney, and go way into the weeds on all this stuff. Same with Rogan. I would love to see a Rogan interview with Whitney Webb. It would be fantastic. And I'm sure that his audience, I've seen his audience asking for it. So it might not have happened yet, but if his audience keeps asking him for it, you'll get it. So, to continue talking about paid shills, let's jump into this story about the dark money group influencing the Democrats. And actually, this clip that I'm going to start this with is a very good segue because it's also Glenn Greenwald, and he's talking with Taylor Lorenz, who, if you remember, was roundly laughed at and pointed at for her kind of pro-censorship views back in the days. But I feel like she's come around in a lot of ways. She was one of the people who I saw very early on talking about how they had this like protect children thing coming out on for YouTube. she was one of the first people I saw saying, hey, this is a move to censor you, using, so it's good that people like her who are more kind of like to the left in that world as far as journalism goes are coming around to see, this is not good. But what we have here is kind of proof that a lot of these Democratic influencers, like David Pakman here and Brian Tyler Cohen and all these like really big budget, these people that Brian Tyler Cohen, I can kind of see, but like, do you know anyone that watches David Pakman's show? Like I cannot think of a single person that's like, wow, a lot happened this week. I can't wait to hear what David Pakman's take is on it. I've never seen that. And so it's always seemed to me as though people like him and Destiny and a lot of these people have like these really inflated audiences. You can see it on Twitter with like the Krasensteins, the people that like are just, what's the word? Insufferable shit libs. Every take is a fucking Democratic Party talking point. One of I was talking to, so I have some cousins and one of them, they're very, obviously pro Kamala, female. One of them is and not to diss females because there's plenty of intelligent. She's very intelligent. I'm not even dissing her, but I thought it was interesting the other day we were talking about something and I brought up Jill Stein and she went right to, yeah, she just shows up when it's election time to steal votes. And I didn't want to start an argument with my family, so I bit my tongue. But what I wanted to say is, yeah, because God forbid the Democrats are ever held accountable for getting their own votes, right? Like, oh, fuck, the Jill Stein came and took our votes. It's like, no, it's your job to win the votes, fuck faces. You're supposed to give something to voters to get these votes, not fucking prop up shit lib, puppets like David Pakman that repeat the same nonsense. Jill Stein stole our votes. So, and the reason I bring that up is just there is clearly and has clearly been paid efforts to prop people like this up for a long time. I mean, since the Hillary era, really, since the Obama, it really started in the Obama era. But let's get into it. Let me show you this video with Taylor Lorenz and Glenn Greenwald kind of breaking it down. We'll stop this and chat during it.
Democratic influencers. We want to talk to her in depth about that, as well as the work she's been doing in warning of and reporting on the dangers to free speech by new online censorship provisions, such as the UK's Online Safety Act, and particularly the growing movement to, under the guise of age verification and protecting children, requiring your identity be submitted before allowing you to participate in multiple platforms on the internet. Taylor, it is great to see you. Really appreciate your taking the time to talk to us tonight.
So I want you to listen closely to this exchange between Glenn and Taylor in light of what we just went through with Whitney Webb.
Glenn, I'm surprised you would say it's great to see me.
It is great to see you. I have had that experience many times where you have arguments based on differences with somebody, and then I think when you talk personally, especially about reporting that I think is important, you can have more constructive conversations. So I am glad to see you. Thank you for coming on.
See, there you go. I want to see that dynamic happen with Whitney. Let's do it, Whitney. Come on.
Yeah, I wish you had given me this benefit of the doubt years ago, because I've been covering these issues for years.
No, I know. I know, and maybe I could say the same. You have your own show. You could have invited me on as well. But in any event, we'll get to some of that, I think.
You're welcome anytime, Glenn.
All right, I'll definitely invite myself on. But since you're here, and I do want to...
I like how she said that he kind of talked over, but she's like, I'm less popular than you.
Get into a couple of those kind of past differences in a very civil way, but only as they relate to things we want to talk to you about tonight. So you have this article in Wired, and it basically narrates how this dark money group is paying Democratic Party influencers, content creators, podcasters who generally support the Democratic Party, money in secret, meaning requiring them to keep it secret. Explain what this group is, kind of who funds it, and how it's functioning.
Yeah, so the 1630 Fund is this massive, powerful, liberal, dark money group that sprung up in the wake of Citizens United. And this is when dark money really started to become a big thing in politics. Really, I mean, I think Citizens United was 2009, but it was really in the 2010s that these groups started to emerge and start doing funding. Now, they're mostly on the right. A lot of dark money is on the right, but this specific dark money group funds liberal causes. So they raised, I think, something like 400.
So there's always been dark money in both parties, but I don't like this left-right framing because, again, I've been voting for Democrats since I could vote, and all I've gotten is George W. Bush policy from the Democrats. Obama's healthcare was a Heritage Foundation plan that Mitt Romney and Bob Dole, Bob Dole came up with it, and Mitt Romney implemented it in Massachusetts as a Republican governor. All the stuff that the Democrats give us, the quote unquote left, is right wing. So don't sit and tell me about, it's primarily dark money among right wing groups. Yeah, because right wing groups have all the money.
Million they distributed in according to Politico in 2022, I think it was. They do a lot of work in this space. And what they're doing recently, which I uncovered in my story, is that they're running this influencer program. There's been all of this talk since the Democrats lost so spectacularly last fall about finding like the liberal Joe Rogan. They discovered the internet exists, and now they're trying to figure out what to do with it. And this is the strategy that they've come up with, is essentially funneling this dark money to influencers through Chorus, which is this content creator, liberal content creator kind of network.
One of the things that I don't understand about, and I never have understood about, and it is true, it's like Democrats had no interest in going on these massive podcasts during the 2024 election, or even before, and anyone paying attention to the internet understood the massive audience and reach that these podcasts had. I mean, much larger than the cable shows or Face the Nation or Meet the Press that these Democratic office holders would love to grow on. It was kind of this massive thing growing under the nose of a lot of people in media who just don't pay attention to anything new. And I know you've been reporting on this kind of internet culture for a long time.
So I just want to pause there for a second and give you kind of my take on what is going on here. In the Obama era, the Democrats kind of, I don't know if you remember when Obama won his first term, they had control of everything. And let's be honest, for 8 years, the Democrats kind of ran the shop, right? During that time, they built a media apparatus through the government that, I'm sure they thought was going to keep them in power forever. And boy, did they claw hard. But the thing is, no one buys it anymore. No one buys any of the framing. No one buys any of it. And it's so easy to see through. David Pakman and Brian Tyler, I knew that they were getting money because they all repeat the same things. These people would not all be reading from the same script if they weren't being paid to. And that's how you know that they're fakes, and it goes for the same for the people on TV, Colbert and Seth Meyers and Kimmel and all those people. They're all, and so, there's proof of this too. And it was Jimmy Dore and Kurt Metzger who brought this up, the Smith Modernization Act, but I've talked about it a lot because that was kind of the point when it became legal for the government to run, the Voice of America type propaganda that they run overseas here in the US. And I think, with USAID and all that stuff, that was the NGO way that they were able to kind of just like it's a way to like distance yourself from funding the media. And I don't want to sound like a broken record. Let me let these guys finish real quick.
But it strikes me that the way these shows that they're so worried about, like Joe Rogan, like Theo Vaughn, Andrew Schultz, a lot of these kind of biggest programs that became pro-Trump influencers, they really emerged organically. It's not like they had dark money funding them. These were people who went online, started having just like normal conversations, often comedians.
And people can tell. That's the thing. You can tell. You look at like the Mark Marons and the Lex Friedmans versus like Theo Vaughn or Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, I don't think he's the level of comedian as say like Theo Vaughn even. There's a lot of Theo Vaughn's jokes that I remember. Joe Rogan has some funny stuff, and I'm not saying he's a bad comedian, but like the reason his show is popular isn't because of his comedy. It's because he's a curious guy who has a lot of different interests and a lot of interesting people on his show. I didn't start listening to Joe Rogan because of Joe Rogan. I didn't go like, oh, dude, that guy from Fear Factor, fuck yeah, I can't wait to hear what he has to say. I started listening to Joe Rogan because of his guests, because of Bernie. He had Bernie Sanders on there, and I was like, oh wow, this is great. Like he had a real conversation with a politician, and and then of course, what did they do? They made Bernie apologize for going on. Remember that they painted Joe Rogan as a right-wing racist, and that's the thing that it's so obvious. The reason that the Joe Rogans and the Theo Vons are popular is because they're not reading from the script. People want outside of that echo chamber. And this is the thing that the Democrats, I know that they understand it, but they don't care because there's so much money in the ecosystem that they've built during the Obama years that they're not trying to let it go. And that's where this kind of shit comes into play, this dark money paid influencer shit. They're like, well, we're going to funnel all this money to these people. Maybe if that's how we do it, if it's Rogan, we got to get the internet, but they've been doing this for a long time, as we're going to get into in a second.
And in the course of that, they started attracting, you kind of call them normies who weren't that interested in politics. And then they became political to the extent it related to their specific concerns, things like censorship or woke suppression, things that they perceived were harming them. I don't understand how Democrats think that they're going to compete with that by taking either people who are already having an audience full of liberal and Democrats and just shuffling money to them, or trying to create it in some artificial way where they're kind of forced to just do political content. Like, what do they think is their goal here?
Yeah, well, I want to be clear. There is tons of money on the right in terms of dark money. The Republican ecosystem is flush with dark money. But the difference is that it's more bottom up in terms of their media strategy than top down. So you're right, especially the comedians that you mentioned. I've never heard of those people taking dark money at all. But there are a lot of conservative influencers, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, others, that have taken dark money or have taken money where they don't exactly know 100% where it's.
Yeah, Tim Pool made the mistake of taking some dark money, then they smeared him as being a Russian with.
Coming from who the funder is. And that's not great. But usually the way it works and what I've seen from my reporting is that these Republican groups will sort of notice someone online. They might not even have interaction with that person online, and they'll just sort of start pumping. They'll start boosting them in the feed. They'll start doing paid media for them, like just sort of organically like testing things and boosting things and trying a lot. The Democrats are obsessed with control. We know that they love this like top-down sort of structure of media because they're such institutional.
Because that's what they built. That's what I'm saying. They built this infrastructure in the Obama years, and they thought they were going to be able to use it to skate through election after election after election with messaging and identity politics shit.
And so with the influencer industry, not only did they sort of malign the influencer industry for years, but now they're sort of seeking to gatekeep it in various ways and sort of like, have this more top-down control over it, not some sort of organic thing. And I think it's very notable, too, that the content creators that they want to fund don't have any organic traction. Most of them are just these sort of centrist, neoliberal, people that, frankly, will never call, a genocide a genocide. They'll never speak out against Israel. They'll never speak out against, all of the censorship stuff. They're not rocking the boat, basically. They're happy to toe the Democratic Party line. And I think that's a problem because those are.
That's true on both sides, too. The right is a lot more aggressive about the Israel military stuff in their own ways. But honestly, the new right is to the left of the Democrats in a lot of ways. So
not the people that have cultural currency online. If the Democrats want to win, they need to start working with people that, frankly, don't agree. Like, they just need to change their
if the Democrat,
policies and so many things. But yeah, it's a very different strategy. It's more of a top-down strategy where the Republican, even though there's also a lot of dark money in the Republican world, it's more bottom-up.
Totally.
Yeah. What the Democrats need to do is stop focusing on messaging and focusing on giving the voters what they want. This is another reason, why I'm glad that Trump won, because the left proved, hey, Democrats, you need these voters. You're not going to be able to skate on right wing in it anymore, because if people want right wing, they can just vote for the Republicans. And you're just right wing light with messaging that pretends that you're not. And that's what needs to change. And that's what they don't understand. That's why Zoran Mondami is so popular, because he's actually speaking the language that people want a Democrat to speak to working people. In the Democrats, it started with Bill Clinton. I'm sure you know this, but the party has completely gone corporate. And no amount of messaging is going to change that unless you start doing shit for your voters. Sorry, guys.
I mean, and yet you can, kind of plant your flag either in like any faction or party. You could say, I'm a Democrat. I'm here to promote Democrats, defend Democrats, cheer for Democrats, and criticize Republicans. You can say, I'm in MAGA. I'm here to mock liberals and the Democratic Party and even like parts of the anti-Trump Republican establishment. And you can build a big audience that way, big in terms of the number of people watching, the amount of money you're making. But I really question how much influence you actually have, because the people who are going to gravitate toward those shows are people who already love the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And want
Exactly. You're an echo chamber.
to hear validation, right? And the problem with the Democrats is not the people who love the Democratic Party. As you say, it's even younger people on the left who I think either stayed home or in some cases even voted for Trump because of their anger over the Biden-Harris support for the genocide in Gaza by arming and funding Israel. So what is the nature of these contracts in terms of the constraints that it imposes on the influencers who they're
Listen
paying?
to this.
Yeah, there are some significant constraints. And certainly there are restrictions in these contracts that I myself as a journalist would never feel comfortable agreeing to. There are parts of the contract that talk about that you cannot speak. You cannot ever disclose the name of the funder who's funding you. You can't disclose that you're part of this program. You have to funnel your bookings. Like when you get a political booking, say I get to interview Zoran, one creator said, you have to then potentially funnel that through Chorus. So Chorus and the 1630 fund, like they're trying to act as these sort of like middlemen and kind of control access to certain politicians, control who gets a voice online. And yeah, that's a problem. I think that there's concerns about editorial independence. Also, there are restrictions on the type of content that can be created with using Chorus funds. So if you use Chorus funds, which some of these creators are getting $8,000 a month, it's pretty much probably most of their budget for that month. They can only they can't talk about specific candidates or causes without approval from Chorus.
And that is not going to work. I remember several years ago, Bill Maher, when Bush won against Kerry or whatever, I remember Bill Maher saying like the Democrats need to have better messaging and stuff like that, which was true at the time, but the messaging has to match the action, because that is another thing with Obama. He sold us a bill of goods, and I don't think he was a terrible president. He did some good stuff. He made us look good on the world stage, but he ran on change we can believe in and did all the same Republican shit for 8 years. So just to jump back over to David Pakman here, and I want to go to the comments real quick because I saw someone earlier say something. Where is it? Someone had a comment about David Pakman being the worst person on the internet. Anyway, I'll dig through that stuff later. So David Pakman, of course, was one of the names that came out in this that kind of looked the worst. And Ken Klippenstein kind of called about commentator David Pakman is secretly getting paid to shill for the Democratic Party. David Pakman was literally paid a salary of $8,000 a month by the Democratic Party to avoid talking about Israel. So this is interesting because it ties into a short I just did, which I'm also going to play here, but let me read this to you real quick first. The decision to avoid Palestine by Democratic-aligned media seems to be deliberate, and it goes beyond Midas Touch. Midas Touch is part of a broader universe of content creators that are aligned with the Democratic Party, which include Brian Tyler Cohen and David Pakman. Others, among others, notably, last March, according to a source with the events, Pakman attended a private off-the-record meeting with Kamala Harris on the day of Joe Biden's State of the Union address. During the trip, he met with Cohen, the Meiselas brothers, and dozens of other so-called independent progressive media figures. In an internal email, Pakman later told his staff that the content creators at the White House had talked among themselves and everyone had admired that they deliberately avoided producing Gaza coverage in order to prevent controversy. One could argue that this is probably a big reason why these particular influencers were invited to the White House in the first place. Pakman, for his part, has previously asserted that Israel would never waste ordnance on Palestine civilians, and that the news that he views Congressman Richie Torres, who is perhaps best known for being one of AIPAC's top recipients of funding, as the kind of person who he would like to see lead the progressive movement, in quotes. So real quick, Meiselas being part of this group, I just want to take you back to this. I did this short the other day that I thought was really good, and I'm going to show it again here. It instantly got taken down off TikTok as soon as I posted it.
Exhaustive round of personal interviews designed to help our judges discover what makes each one special.
You're 5'9" reading? Serious, huh? We made my short again tonight before the Okay. Thank you very much, Amy.
The concentration was intense inside the judge.
So I want to show you the people behind this, because this got me thinking, okay, Midas Touch. Do you know who they are? So Midas Touch is an American progressive media company. The network describes itself as doing pro-democracy journalism. They have that in quotations, notice. Previously, the Midas Touch name was used by its founders for a liberal American political action committee formed in March 2020 with the purpose of stopping the re-election of Donald Trump. In other words, this is a grift on dumb liberals. They've already failed twice at their mission. The super PAC aligned with the Democratic Party in the 2020 United States presidential election. The PAC changed its name to Democracy Defense Action in 2023. So here's the history. The committee was founded in March 2020 by three brothers from Long Island while in quarantine due to the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the brothers, Ben Meiselas, an attorney who represented the former NFL player Colin Kaepernick. Another brother, Brett Meiselas, is an Emmy-winning video editor who worked for the Ellen DeGeneres Show. The third brother, Jutan, is a marketing supervisor living in Brooklyn, New York. I also found this article from Rolling Stone from back in April of 2021. The trouble with Midas Touch. The brothers behind the breakout anti-Trump PAC are the golden boys of the resistance. But when Rolling Stone took a look beneath the surface, their response turned Trumpian. The full story of Midas Touch is more complicated. The group spent more than $1 million on an advertising strategy that it calls revolutionary, but campaign veterans and independent experts say is nonsensical and a more effective tool for fundraising than for helping Democrats win elections. Exactly. Lincoln Project is the same thing. A bunch of conservatives grifting off liberals who take your money and win nothing. And despite its promised transparency, Midas Touch's financial structure makes a dollar-for-dollar accounting of its spending impossible. And according to a former Federal Election Commission attorney, raises some of the same legal issues that got the Trump campaign into trouble back in 2020. So Pacman already came out and said that, all this has been debunked and stuff. Of course, he can't. He's got to keep taking that sweet Democrat cash. But here is a little bit
For years, I've been saying the left needs to organize independent media in the way that the right has been doing. The left needs to fund independent creators the way that the right does.
Again, the characterization of the left as being the Democrats is just a joke. Just the framing is bad. He's just begging for money. He's like, well, you guys need to give us money because if you don't, no one will care about me.
Right has won even arguably presidential elections because they're organized with regard to online and independent media. They're killing us. We've been so behind. And this kind of support for creators is exactly what I've been advocating for.
But it doesn't actually win elections, does it? It does not. So the other side of this is, this is now we have proof positive that this is going on, but we've had proof that it's going on for a long time. Here's crystal ball push polling back during the 2024 election. All right, y'all, here's my map. Kamala wins all 7 swing states, but I don't have the balls to give her anything crazy like Iowa or Florida. Basically, I think Seltzer is directionally correct. Oh, maybe that's a poll or something. Women going for big for Kamala. Cowardly pollsters afraid of underestimating Trump have rigged their polls and missed the post-January 6th shifts. Again, the January 6th shit. That's why that cannot be undone. That's the foundation for 10 years worth of nonsense. And missed the post. Kamala has also been effective battling Trump to a tie on econ. Trump's overly online campaign and general toxicity was the final nail in the coffin. Oh my God. How, I've got into this before, how I used to work for a polling company, but this is what in the polling world they would call push polling, where you tell people the results are a certain way. So they go, oh, well, she's going to win anyway, so there's no point in me going out to vote. Or I better, I'm going to vote for her. I'm going to vote for this person because she's going to win. Or, it definitely influences people in a lot of ways to vote for the candidate that you're saying is going to win. It's push polling. And then you have, back in the 2024 election, there was proof that Kamala Harris campaign and the Biden campaign before her was paying influencers. And this is Wall Street Apes. Important. Kamala Harris is paid. This is from, I didn't get the date, but during the election, even those who have nothing to do with politics, Kai Cenat exposes he was reached out to by Kamala to promote her for president. He's a Twitch streamer with 12.7 million followers. He declined. Kamala Harris's support is paid. Here's that video of Kai Cenat, if you didn't see it, just in case.
Who gonna have the audacity to text me, we need you a part of the campaign. At first I was thinking she was talking about like a game, a video game, like a Modern Warfare game, or some shit. Or if not that, a clothing brand. I'm like, what campaign? Shorty gonna say, politics, I'm going to be 100. Somehow, something was to go into where I do the stream of politics, I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm going to sit on my stream and say, why did you guys call me? Like, I don't know. I've never did anything with politics. And these blogs are like trying to say, yo, we gotta do this shit, Kai. And it's all the top blogs. But I'm like, bro, since when did niggas care about what Kai Cenat had to talk about for politics?
And that is why he has 12 million followers, because he's an honest guy. He's like, he was just bald-faced honest with his audience about that they called him and tried to get him to shill for Kamala Harris, and he would not do it. And the lesson that I take away from all of this is that if you want to have a real and lasting audience, don't be a shill. Don't shill for things that you don't necessarily believe in. Because then you just sound, we've made this point several times, but there was no reason to watch Crystal and Kyle or TYT or David Pakman a few years ago, because you could just tune into MSNBC and get the same shit. And that's one of the reasons that guys like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn took off in the post-COVID era, is because it was so obvious that all these people were reading from the exact same script and everyone was clawing to get out of the echo chamber. So David Pakman, you're terrible. And this is a actual footage of anyone who still watches David Pakman. Ain't that America? You and me. Ain't that America? All right, let's move on to something a little more exciting. Trump and RFK Jr. are going to ban the COVID vax. That's right, folks. You heard it here first. Okay, you didn't hear it here first, but you heard it here. We'll see how this plays out, but this is a very interesting story for a couple reasons. And you'll see what those reasons are in just a moment, because they involve my former hero, Bernie Sanders, and the Democratic Party as well. But let's kick this one off with just Kim Iverson's take, because Kim Iverson does great work, and I like to just.
Trump and RFK Jr. might be banning the COVID vaccine in the next coming months. This is reporting that comes from the Daily Beast. I got to read a little bit of this to you because, of course, the framing from the Daily Beast, which is an ultra-liberal site that published, including several articles.
Chelsea Clinton, I believe, is on the board at the Daily Beast.
About me calling me a conspiracy theorist during COVID because I said the vaccine doesn't stop the spread, which is such a conspiracy theory. Will they ever issue an
Stop the spread sounds like an anti-sex thing. Like, stop the spread.
apology or a retraction for that? No, they won't. They wrote this: Trump and RFK Jr. to ban COVID-19 vaccine within months. The Trump administration will move to pull the COVID vaccines off the U.S. market within months. One of RF Kennedy Jr.'s closest associates has told the Daily Beast. Dr. Asim Malhotra, a British cardiologist who has repeatedly claimed in the face of scientific consensus that the vaccines are more dangerous than the virus, scientific consensus, told the Daily Beast that Kennedy's stance is shared by influential members of President Donald Trump's family. Like Kennedy himself, no Trump holds any scientific qualifications. Of course, the Daily Beast wants to throw that out there. Newsweek also reported on this one. The
Daily Beast framing, of course, is like, oh my God, our precious decorum and norms. Oh no, someone might change something. Oh my God.
They give it a little bit of a better, they shine a slightly better light on it than Daily Beast, which is known for just being as clickbaity as possible. But Newsweek says President Donald Trump and Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. are allegedly planning to ban the COVID vaccine within months, years after Trump labeled the vaccine's development during the pandemic as a monumental achievement, according to an associate of Kennedy's comments to the Daily Beast. Yes, Trump did call this a monumental achievement. He's been calling it that. So I'm surprised if they're going to ban it. I actually don't think they're going to ban it outright. Maybe they.
So, okay, that is the one thing I will give people that don't think this is going to happen, is that Trump will never admit that he's wrong about something. So if he admits he's wrong about this and they do pull this, good on him for, changing course on that. We'll see.
Well, let's see what happens. Dr. Malhotra is saying that it's probably going to be banned by the Trump administration and Kennedy within the next, a month or two, that they're going to be submitting the data and showing that it's actually more dangerous than it is helpful. That is what they're claiming. I don't know. I haven't seen the data. Certainly it's caused a lot of people a lot of problems. The commentary, though, on this Newsweek article, I just have to read some of this too, because it's interesting, some of the things people have said. But they're basically saying that the potential phasing out of the COVID-19 vaccine could be coming in the next few months, and that here's what the White House. So the Daily Beast talked to Dr. Malhotra. He said, yeah, this is potentially happening. The White House denied Malhotra's claims, however, saying in a statement to Newsweek, the administration is relying on gold standard science and is committed to radical transparency to make decisions that affect all Americans. White House spokesperson Kush Desai told Newsweek on Monday. Unless announced by the administration, however, any discussion about HHS policy should be dismissed as baseless speculation. Okay. Then it goes to say this is the.
So honestly, too, I think that they have to say that to kind of keep the pharma lobbyists off their back for a little while. They're probably like, hey, we're not actually doing this. Don't come at me, bro. Don't come at me, pharma industry, with your lobby groups and all the shit that you. Don't throw a bunch of money at us. We're not actually going to do this. We're just going to pretend that we're not doing it right now.
Don't tase me, bro. Don't tase me. I didn't do anything. Ow!
The Trump administration, and more specifically HHS under the guidance of Kennedy, is causing confusion for Americans who just want the correct scientific and medical information at their disposal. Dr. Amy Butcher, chief behavioral officer at Lirio, told Newsweek, quote, my professional view is a scientific consensus.
Chief behavioral officer at Lirio. What's Lirio? I'm just going to do a quick Google on that. Chief behavioral officer Lirio. Huh. I don't know what that is. Oh, Lirio. Okay, hold on. Now, I had to figure out how to spell it. It's Lirio. Lirio can refer to what the hell? A brand that creates. Okay, I don't think I found the right Lirio. Hold on a sec. Lirio. A personalization engine for digital health. Okay, so it's a healthcare company. Who's it owned by? Interesting. I'll have to go into the weeds on that. I don't want to bore the shit out of you while I go down a Google rabbit hole. But Lirio is a digital healthcare company, apparently.
is that overall, vaccination is a good thing. It's important for public health. The benefits for most people outweigh the risks. And of course, there are individuals who have health histories where vaccination may be contraindicated, but that's not the majority of people. What I'm seeing as a behavioral scientist is the lack of clarity from the administration and the willingness to change course on what they are calling accepted science. Yeah, because that's how it works, actually. So she's upset. I can't believe you would change course on this. Yeah, like you, how dare you? The people just tell them the one thing and then just keep doing that one thing. Bloodletting works, right? Lobotomies work. Just stick with it. You already said it. You did it. You claimed it. Stick with it. Never change. Never change. Saying that, so for one, especially with something so fast moving like the COVID vaccine and COVID itself, the science had to change because it was just, okay, we've learned more and now here's the new information. That is what all the scientists should be championing, saying, look, and I would read this on the Iceland government website because they did it the right way. And they actually would say to the people, look, we don't know very much. As we know, we will tell you. This is what we think. We think this, but this might change. And if it does, we'll let you know right away. And that's the right way to approach people. The Icelandic government didn't treat their population like morons.
Okay, so quick sidebar here. Do you want to know why Iceland did that and why they didn't treat their population like morons? Here's why. Iceland permits pharmaceutical advertisements for OTC medicines to the public, but strictly prohibits direct-to-consumer advertising for prescription-only drugs. This is consistent with most European nations, with only the US and New Zealand allowing general public advertising of prescription medications. So Iceland's media doesn't depend on pharmaceutical advertising, so they can be honest, basically, with their people. But let's keep going down this rabbit hole, because here's what happened today when I searched Google for info on RFK and Trump. This is the search results that came up. Top stories: RFK Jr.'s quest to prove himself Trump's most destructive cabinet member. White House defends Robert F. Kennedy Jr. amid CDC turmoil. Sanders pressures RFK Jr. to resign as health chief after CDC chaos. Bernie Sanders demands that RFK Jr. step down as health secretary. What a cuck of the highest order. So this is from The Guardian. Bernie Sanders out here defending Big Pharma. Bernie Sanders demands RFK Jr. step down. Vermont senator says Kennedy is endangering the health of the American people as head of the U.S. Health Department. Oh my God. What a world we live in. Bernie Sanders has joined in on growing public calls for Donald Trump's health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., to resign after recent chaos across health agencies. In an op-ed published in the New York Times on Saturday, the Vermont senator accused Kennedy of endangering the health of the American people now and into the future, added he must resign. Mr. Kennedy and the rest of the Trump administration tell us over and over that they want to make America healthy again. That's a great slogan. I agree with it. The problem is that since coming into office, President Trump and Mr. Kennedy have done exactly the opposite, Sanders wrote. Sanders pointed to the White House firing of Susan Monatez, the director of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as 4 other top CDC officials who resigned in protest this week after Monterez refused to act as a rubber stamp for Kennedy's dangerous policies. Despite the overwhelming opposition to the medical community, Secretary Kennedy has Kennedy has continued his long-standing crusade against vaccines and his advocacy of conspiracy theories that have been rejected repeatedly by scientific experts, Sanders wrote. What a douchebag. So now I'm curious about this lady, Susan Monterez. I should have done due diligence before I came on here, but was she a pharma? Why is Susan being out? Susan Monterez, PhD, World Medical Innovation Forum. Here we go. Susan Monterez is a Globally recognized leader with more than 20 years experience in health innovation throughout her career. Here, let me share this with you. Interesting. I don't know much about this lady, so I'm sure that they probably fired her because she has ties to pharma and National Security Council, affairs of the Office of Science and Technology Policy as director. So, clearly I don't see anything that's, shady right off the bat. But I also think that, Trump and the incoming administration, they have to get rid of people like this who are long stays in Washington if they want to change anything, right? Bernie Sanders, though, what a joke of a man. I just can't even with this guy. He's out here defending pharmaceutical companies, acting like we didn't just get bamboozled by these assholes. But I digress. Let's move on to our next section of the night, Republican clown shit. And there's a lot of it. And if you're worried, don't worry, because I have Democratic clown shit for you too. But this one, we're going to get into the Minneapolis shooting. Now, I don't know a lot about this, so this is almost kind of like an exploratory trip for me. But the update here is kind of the politicization of this thing, and I wanted to go into the weeds on it a little bit because the messaging around it is interesting. They're calling this person a right-wing terrorist who shot up a Catholic school. That doesn't seem very right-wing. That's an interesting, that's very Orwellian. It's like Newspeak type shit. Oh yeah, she's totally right-wing. That's why she shot up a Catholic school. And I've seen pictures of the guns online that had like Sharpied like messages like Israel's bad, Jews are bad. It looks like the cops who picked them up wrote it on themselves because it's all in different handwriting. And listen, that's for entertainment purposes only. I don't know the details of the case. Maybe I'm way off base on that, but it does seem just a tad bit fishy. But let's dive into this article from CNN Politics because, when you want the unvarnished truth, you go to CNN Politics. And that's where we're going today. So, 11 days after an assassination attempt against Donald Trump last year, then FBI Director Christopher Wray testified in front of lawmakers who were hungry for information. But he was circumspect. Yes, the shooter targeted Trump, but Wray wasn't going to sit there and speculate or draw inferences about his motive. A congressman asked Wray, "Do you and your team know the motive of the shooter or have any idea what could have driven it?" Wray responded, "Well, know and have any idea are two very different things." Okay, that's fair, Mr. Wray. I like the setup here, CNN. When a Republican asked him if a Democratic rhetoric played any role, Wray balked. "Respectfully, I don't think it's appropriate for me as the FBI director to be characterizing or engaging in public commentary on specific people's rhetoric." But the reason he was asked that question is because whenever there's a shooting in the past, or whenever there's anything, they always blame right-wing rhetoric. Now, I will say this, like I said earlier about the Obama people kind of creating this infrastructure for propaganda, the Trump people now have control of that. So, I mean, a trans shooter shooting up a Catholic school seems like a right-wing propaganda. Look at these trans people, they're out of control. You know what I mean? In the same way that the Democrats are like, oh, look, Tim Pool works with Russia. Anyway, let's keep going. That was then. This is now. In keeping with the second Trump administration's extraordinary moves to comment on ongoing investigations and politicize them, top officials leapt this week to attach a mass shooting at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis that killed 2 children and injured more than a dozen others to the left, both implicitly and explicitly. They did so even as the known picture of the shooter, Robin Westman's words, painted a complicated and often incoherent picture of Westman's beliefs and political motives. Now, I think it's interesting that the same people who take money from gun manufacturers will jump to say, oh, it's mental health, it's mental illness. to attribute motives to these people that are clearly mentally fucking ill. Like this person, if you're willing to go into a fucking church and shoot innocent children, you are fucking gone. You have no connection with reality anymore. You have no empathy or any kind of just random people. You know, it's anyway. Don't get me on a tangent on that. To keep going, I love this picture of cockeyed Kash Patel they threw in here. Perhaps most striking of all was Ray's successor as FBI Director Kash Patel. While Patel didn't ascribe a motive to Westman, he cherry-picked a handful of Westman's words. He said Westman left multiple anti-Catholic, anti-religious references, spoke of hatred and violence towards Jewish people, and said free Palestine, and wrote an explicit call for violence against President Trump on a firearm magazine. So, okay, none of that stuff lines up. None of that stuff lines up. That's so weird. I'm mad at Catholic and Jewish people, just religious people. Patel said the crime was being investigated as not just terrorism, but a hate crime targeting Catholics. Also interesting to see the Republicans, you know, using the hate crime stuff that they decried a few years ago, which is kind of ridiculous. You know, someone got killed. You don't need to ascribe additional motives to it. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem echoed Patel, noting that Westman wrote, "Where is your God?" and killed Donald Trump on her weapons and ammunition. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard was more explicit about Westman's motive, saying it was anti-God sentiment that motivated the shooter. Really? What about the pro-God sentiment that motivates Israel or the Hamas? They're all religious terrorists. And I will not apologize for saying that. What do these things have in common? They happen to align with groups and people Republicans have set themselves up as protecting and have accused the left of attacking, along with citing Westman's references to Trump. The intimation is clearly that this was an attack motivated by leftist ideology. Well, I mean, that makes a little more sense for someone shooting up a church, but still, the person is clearly mentally insane. So trying to ascribe any clear motives to the person are, you know, probably not worthwhile. I don't think this person really knew what they were fucking talking about if they went into a Catholic school and shot it up to oppose right-wing policies, because right-wing policies are based on Catholic values usually. That's why there's so much child rape involved. But the fuller picture of Westman's words shows this is a highly selective reading. It suggests the shooter could have been influenced by a host of extremists with varying and often right-wing views. Westman expressed hatred toward a whole host of groups, including ones that could be coded as allies of the left. Westman wrote racial slurs against Black and Hispanic people and an epithet for gay people, as well as nuke India. Westman appeared to celebrate anti-Muslim terrorists, Anders Breivik from Norway and Brenton Tarrant from New Zealand. Westman cited the cases of anti-government white supremacists, extremists Randy Weaver and Timothy McVeigh, and the Branch Davidian standoff in Waco, Texas, cases that became rallying cries on the far right, and all things we need to ban from the conversation because they clearly make people radicalized, right? Westman also appeared to celebrate those who attacked Christian institutions and Jews, but the common thread seems to be the celebration of hatred and massacres of many kinds. Yeah, this person was insane. It's a hodgepodge of potential motivations that suggest an ideology that isn't neatly pinned down, but we're going to politicize it anyway. Trump administration officials and others have gestured at the fact that Westman was a transgender. Patel seemed to make a point to call Westman the male subject, despite Westman having taken legal steps to transition and live as a woman. I love that that's what these people are outraged about. They're like, these guys are misgendering the shooter. How dare they? And it's this kind of stuff that just makes me think even more that it's an op. Because when you put this kind of stuff, when this kind of stuff happens, these kind of people come out with the most ridiculous takes. How dare he? All right, let's move on to the next slide here. Hold on a second. They weren't necessarily saying that was relevant, but they were certainly making a point to say it. And that fed into right-wing allegations that trans people are more likely to commit such atrocities. So, okay, now I'm really confused because CNN's like, this is clearly a right-wing terrorist who was influenced by the right, but also a trans person who the right is misgendering. This does not make any sense. There is no evidence supporting the latter claim, though. The perception seems to owe in large part to people falsely claiming previous mass shooters were transgender. Often shortly after the shootings, this happened after school shootings in Uvalde, Texas in 2022, Madison, Wisconsin last year, among others. Even Thursday, Donald Trump Jr. repeated the false claim that shooters had been transgender. Conservative media figures, especially on Fox News, were happy to connect the dots more explicitly. The left is weaponizing trans kids and turning them into culture warriors, and they've been turned loose against the church, schools, and Trump. Fox News host Jesse Waters said Wednesday, "You see it, I see it. No, I see insane people who have nothing to live for or are suicidal and drugged up on all kinds of shit and want to kill themselves, but take a bunch of other people down with them to show how much pain they are feeling inside." And we live in a society that doesn't want to listen to people, that doesn't want to help people in this kind of position. And it has nothing to do with race or gender. I mean, obviously most shooters are male. There's not a lot of female mass shooters, if any. So there is that side of it, but also it can't be, you can't pin it down to left or right political shit. It has nothing to do with politics. These people are fucking insane. Added Rep Byron Donalds of Florida on Fox host Laura Ingram's show that night. This is about mental health issues that the radical left refuses to acknowledge. The radical left, Jesus Christ. The radical left hasn't held any power ever in the United States. It comes from their crazy ideology, which is damaging so many children in the United States who are now becoming young adults. Ingram responded, mutilating their bodies and their minds. Now, I've said this many times. I'm very pro, if you're an adult, be whatever you want to be. But the trans thing is being pushed because there's money in hormone therapy. That is so clear to anyone who's paying attention. Same with the surgeries. And again, this isn't to take away from people. I've said this many times. Sex and gender even, I think, is a spectrum. And if it wasn't, you wouldn't see very feminine men and very masculine women. It is a spectrum. Some people lean more to one side. Some people lean all the way to one side or the other. And that's fine. But also, these people are being taken advantage of by pharma companies because they know once you get on this hormone therapy, it's like Ozempic or something. It's a lifelong thing where you have to keep taking it forever, and you're a money fucking machine. So to keep going here, we're almost done with this, and I think this ends. And to the extent we're taking Westman's words at face value, Westman explicitly said that wasn't a motivation. This is not a church or religion attack. That is not the message, Westman wrote. The message is there is no message. Again, clearly insane. The episode highlights a kind of rush to judgment has become especially common on the right. It's not just the right, CNN. Trump and his allies have attached his would-be assassin. You just called this transgender person right-wing at the beginning of the article. You're like, oh, the right rushes to judgment. Everybody's going to make political hay out of tragedy if they can. Trump and his allies have attached his would-be assassin, Thomas Matthew Crooks, to the left, despite Crooks having been a registered Republican. Oh, my God. How old was that kid? You think that kid voted in a bunch of elections for Republicans? What fucking planet are you from? And there still being no solid picture of his motivations. We know why that is. It was a similar story with the attack on Paul Pelosi and the shootings of 2 Minnesota state lawmakers this year. Also fucking ops. The lure of attaching these people to the other side based on incomplete and often wrong information is apparently too tempting. But usually this isn't done with an assist from top administration officials who are supposed to be circumspect about prejudging a case. So there were a lot of fun conspiracy theories about this, which rightfully so. It's very odd. Here's one. One day after the Minneapolis shooting, Israeli Special Ops vet Aaron Cohen was on Fox touting Gideon, his Palantir-built AI threat detector, training Israeli-grade autonology. Even Melania posted about preemptive intervention to stop mass shootings. Conspiracy or coincidence? And your boy Mad Crab jumped in here with a little bit of clarification. He says, turns out that Gideon, the Israeli AI predictive policing that was announced a day after the Minneapolis shooting, PSYOP, was a character in the film Minority Report. He was the warden in charge of watching over prisoners forced into halo sleep. The more you know. And just to kind of top this off with sprinkles, here's Ryan Knight, aka Proud Socialist, and he kind of had the best take on all this, which was the mass shooting at Minneapolis school at a Minneapolis school is heartbreaking. But what is even more heartbreaking is both parties will politicize this shooting, and then nothing will change. The corrupt two-party system must go. You are absolutely correct, Ryan. I could not agree more. So let's move on to we covered Republican clown shit. I mean, there was a lot of Democrat clown shit in that too. That's the uniparty for you. You get shit. You get mixed clown shit with sprinkles. So here's some Democrat clown shit. This is an article about, okay, let me, hold on a second before we jump into this. I saw this story about how the Republicans are going after Wikipedia. And I thought, oh, wow, great. Wikipedia sucks. And then I got a little deeper into it and I realized, wow, that's not really the take. And so let's start here with MSNBC's take, which is why this piece is titled, is it filed under Democrat clown shit? Because you're going to see why this is clown shit. Let's get into it. So this is from MSNBC. Jahan Jones, who used to write for Joy Reid, obviously, you know, mine and your favorite political commentator. Republicans are probing Wikipedia, a long-standing MAGA target. House Republicans are probing the online encyclopedia over claims of foreign manipulation, anti-Israel bias, and anti-Semitism. House Republicans have launched an investigation into Wikipedia, a long-standing target of conservative criticism. Really? For several months, Elon Musk and other conservatives have waged a campaign to portray the online encyclopedia as an oppressive tool of leftist manipulation. Now a House committee is investigating allegations of anti-Israel bias at Wikipedia. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky and South Carolina Rep. Nancy Mace, who leads the subcommittee on cybersecurity, sent a letter to Wikipedia's CEO demanding data, documents, and answers to questions stemming primarily from allegations laid out in a March Anti-Defamation League report that Wikipedia editors were permitting anti-Israel rhetoric and anti-Semitic themes to spread on their platform. As if you couldn't tell already what a control mechanism this is, here we go again. Wikipedia officials have refuted the report, saying it included unsupported and problematic claims, but the letter says the report raised troubling questions about potentially systematic efforts to advance anti-Semitic and anti-Israel information in Wikipedia articles.
You're an anti-Semite.
Had to bring Douglas Murray in for that one. Related to conflicts with the state of Israel. The lawmakers also reference an Atlantic Council report. Wow, two great sources right off the bat. The ADL and the Atlantic Council. Definitely trust both of them. That found pro-Kremlin forces have used artificial intelligence tools to help whitewash and rewrite the story of Russia's war with Ukraine. There it is. There's another piece of information we need to control things. The House Oversight Committee is investigating manipulation efforts to determine the role and methods of foreign individuals, those at academic institutions subsidized by the United States taxpayer dollars, as well as Wikipedia's awareness and response, according to a release from Comer's office. The lawmakers clearly want to target specific Wikipedia editors, along with any documents related to the state-sponsored efforts to manipulate Wikipedia entries. They're demanding records showing, identifying, and unique characteristics of accounts, such as names, addresses, for editors whose conduct has been evaluated by Wikipedia's Committee for Resolving Editorial Disputes. Interesting. A spokesperson for the Wikimedia Foundation, which runs Wikipedia, told The Hill that it welcomes the opportunity to respond to the committee's questions and to discuss the importance of safeguarding the integrity of information on our platform. Yeah, I don't know what you're actually safeguarding there, because I got some problems with Wikipedia. The investigation is sure to raise questions, considering that Republicans have spent the past several years denouncing anti-misinformation efforts and demonizing efforts to root out foreign manipulation campaigns, such as those that have been known to thrive on MAGA-friendly platforms and the Musk-owned X. Don't you love that framing? So Wikipedia now is...
You're an anti-Semite.
Because that is how we can control the flow of information. And, you know, not to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but these are the same people who spent their entire, time in opposition to the left, screaming about how you can't just have safe spaces for people and facts don't care about your feelings. And now they're wearing that hat. It's a little pathetic. So I'm going to bring in Chief Censorship Correspondent again, Glenn Greenwald, to talk a little bit about this and close us out with some good commentary.
The House Oversight Committee, which is chaired by James Comer, and this is issued by the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, chaired by Nancy Mace, the Republican from South Carolina, who's currently running for governor, clearly wants and needs APAC money.
All right. Well, apparently the sound didn't record very well on this, so I'm just going to go right to Twitter and get it. Bear with me. One second. We're back. So here is the actual tweet I wanted to show you from Mr. Greenwald.
Yesterday, the House Oversight Committee, which is chaired by James Comer, and this is issued by a subcommittee on cybersecurity chaired by Nancy Mace, the Republican from South Carolina, who's currently running for governor, clearly wants and needs APAC money, so is working very hard to do as many things as she can for Israel. Announced an investigation into Wikipedia and bias on the platform. And I'm certainly somebody who thinks Wikipedia has had a bias, a very liberal kind of anti-populist bias. And you can see it in so many articles, but I never wanted the government to fix that. Fix meaning to control it. But the committee here announced that they were launching an investigation demanding all sorts of documents from Wikipedia as part of this investigation. And the investigation, you will be shocked to learn, overwhelmingly focuses on Israel. And the documents they seek are documents that would enable them to uncover, to dox the identity of editors at WikiLeaks or contributors to WikiLeaks who, in the eyes of, Wikipedia, it's Wikipedia. I think I might have said WikiLeaks once or twice. but they want to dox the identity, uncover the identity, destroy the anonymity of editors at Wikipedia or contributors to Wikipedia who, in the view of the ADL, or I guess this subcommittee led by Nancy Mace, are permitting anti-Israel information. That's the phrase they use, anti-Israel information, to circulate on Wikipedia. They pretend they're interested in other types of activities, including foreign government related activities, but the whole thing focuses clearly on Israel. And they say, we seek your assistance in obtaining documents and communications regarding individuals or specific accounts serving as Wikipedia volunteer editors who violated Wikipedia platform policies, as well as your own efforts to thwart intentional organized effort to inject bias into important and sensitive areas. They say one recent report,
as we saw too, the Republicans clearly want to censor on behalf of Israel, and the Democrats want to censor on behalf of Ukraine. They both got their own grift going on.
Raised troubling questions about potentially systematic efforts to advance anti-Semitic and anti-Israel information in Wikipedia articles related to conflicts of the state of Israel. And there's a footnote that links to a report by the Anti-Defamation League that purports to document
You're an
how
anti-Semite.
anti-Israel and anti-Jewish bias undermines Wikipedia's neutrality. What law says Wikipedia has to be neutral? Why does
You're an
why
anti-Semite.
why does the government have the power to regulate Wikipedia and to make sure that in the government's eyes, they're being neutral or fair about a foreign country, about Israel again? And it's not just that they want to regulate the content. Here's the list of the documents that they're demanding Wikipedia turn over. It includes records, communications, or analysis pertaining to possible coordination within academic institutions or other organized efforts to edit or influence content identified as possibly violating Wikipedia's standards. Also, records showing identifying a unique characteristic of accounts, including names, IP addresses, registration dates, user activity logs for editors subject to action. And then any analysis conducted or reviewed by the Wikipedia Foundation or any third party acting on its behalf of patterns of manipulation or bias relating to anti-Semitism and conflicts of the state of Israel. In sum, they're trying to find the identity of the people who are contributing to Wikipedia or the editors who are making decisions about what the articles will say that in their mind are too critical of Israel. Every week, literally, I'm not even exaggerating, every week there's some new censorship campaign sponsored by primarily the Republican Party, which is in control of the Senate, the House, and the White House, that has no purpose other than to shield and protect Israel from criticism, try and clamp down on the ability of Israel criticism to be heard in the United States, as polls increasingly show that Americans are rapidly turning against it for the obvious reason that they've been watching Israel blow up entire families and children for 22 months now, starving them to death. And in response to that polling, they're increasingly trying to control the flow of information. So we're talking here about control of a new AI 24/7 surveillance system that scrapes the internet and reports to the government what it thinks shouldn't be said, accompanied by a school district forcing every public school to fly an Israeli flag, and yet another committee investigation, this one led by Nancy Mace, who's running for governor, wants AIPAC's money, to try and uncover the identity, destroy the anonymity for Wikipedia contributors if they are contributing what she or people in the government regard as anti-Israel information. I don't think I need to explain the trend. It kind of explains
You're an
itself.
anti-Semite.
And in just a second, right after the break, we're going to be talking to Taylor Renz, who has a new article out on a
That's the trend.
dark money group.
The trend explains itself.
You're an anti-Semite.
So I want to close this segment out tonight with one of my works of art here. And it's a throwback. I think you're going to enjoy it.
Sledgehammer!
All right, what's going on? I gotta get to work.
I've got a sniper on that roof. Hammer, what are you doing? You'll get killed!
I think that very accurately sums up the conflict in the Middle East, especially at the end when he goes, I think I got him. And that's pretty much it for tonight as far as stories go. So I'm going to jump to the comments now because, first of all, I forgot to give props to my boy. Truth violates community standards. I think of you all the time, Truth, because whenever I post to TikTok, my shit gets community violations. That short I played earlier about the Mycelis brothers and Midas Touch, I uploaded it to TikTok and it fucking immediately was taken down. Glenn believes the 9/11 cover story. A lot of people do. I feel bad for those people. Maybe he just has to pretend like he does for TV. Tracy is pregnant. What else we got here? This is the comment I was looking for earlier. Pac-Man is the worst person on the internet. I could not agree more, and thank you for saying it. He is totally paid. Yeah, I mean, you could tell with all of these people, like I said, they're all reading from the same script. That's how you know. It's not, that's why you see all these accounts on Twitter that are like, oh, the people who are critical of Israel are being paid by Qatar, because that's the game they play. So they project that onto everybody else. It's so clear. Oh, you're being paid by Russia. I'm being paid by the Democratic Party. I can't listen to Greenwald talk. I mean, he's not really cut out for broadcasting, but he's a good journalist. So I've grown to enjoy. Like I don't hate his voice. What else we got here? There is no left in the Dems. I love Glenn's catty, nasally teenager who's annoyed with her dad voice. Yes, that is very, very apt description of Glenn. He does have like kind of a, that's the thing. He takes this condescending tone with Whitney. Like, well, she said this stuff about me and that's why I can't see her. But, he's only human. What are you going to do? What else we got here? It's a shame Whitney and Glenn can't connect on Epstein because they largely agree. Yeah, totally. I think they will. I really hope that Rogan also brings her on. I think he will eventually. But I think, like I said, it's one of those things. It's a heavy topic, and he's got to read her book first so he has something to talk about, because the conversation is going to start with, I read your book. What about this? What about, I mean, that's how Rogan operates. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if it was all set up to take down Lauren Cheney. Still her fault for letting greed get the best of her. I don't know what that's about. You might have to explain that to me a little bit more. People must think that massive audiences appear out of the blue with no. Believe me, bro. I've been doing this for a little while, and consistency is the most important factor, I feel like, because the people that have the biggest audiences are the ones that are consistent with their broadcasting. And not only do you grow your audience that way, but you become better as a broadcaster. The thing I like about internet and modern internet culture is it's kind of like, just do it. And then as you kind of go, you shape it, like throw it. It's like, just throw the clay onto the potting wheel and start shaping it. That's how I see kind of this world. It's like, just start doing it. For me, it was like, I just wanted to talk shit about politics, and I was alienating a lot of people in my family. And, you know how it is. You talk to people, normies, or people who don't really follow things or don't read a lot about politics, and, they don't understand a lot of the stuff. So for me, it's therapeutic to go through it all and just, spit the venom out onto the internet. And, obviously I want to have constructive debates and, maybe even pose my own constructive answers to some of these problems. But yeah, Pac-Man is a shill, no doubt. I agree. Yeah. So push polling, Look it up. It's totally one of those things that they. So I tell this story a lot, so I'll keep it short. But I used to work for a polling company, and one of our clients was the Mormon Church, and we had to do this survey. We would call people, and they made us say we had to read this verbatim. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So you call people and you give them this list of questions. It's like 20 questions. Like every question, you're like, do you believe that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is this? And on a scale of 1 to 7, they're like 3. And you're like, the Church of Jesus. So you're like brainwashing your respondent as you're doing this survey. And then at the end, of the survey, the results that they get out of that is like, people believe that the Mormon Church is a Church of Jesus Christ because we just fucking told them it was like 20 times, so you kind of push people to get the answers that you want. And I feel like they do that with those polls. Trump sued the lady in Iowa for that. I don't know if you saw that whole story, but the lady in Iowa who does the most respected poll or whatever had Kamala beating him or something. And he actually sued her for that because it's not based on anything. It's totally one of those things where they go, here, put this out and just show her as winning. Like if you can will it into reality with the voters that way, so people just do that. And it's fucking stupid. It's rebranding. They might pull it, but only to offer new products to continue the grift indoctrination. Yeah. The Democratic Party needs to actually do something for their voters if they want to win elections and stop trying to be Republican light or Republican with a fucking identity blanket over it. The Lauren Chen comment was about Tim Pool. Okay. Lauren Chen. Okay. I know who she is. Russian money laundered. Lauren was quite successful in the right wing and one of the first anti-Israel voices on the right. Okay. So first it was Russia. Now that's not working as much anymore. They're going with Qatar. And oh my God, it gets worse and worse every fucking day. But again, I'm optimistic, man. I don't want to be like this bright-eyed optimist, but the fact that you have prominent voices from both sides of the political debate, from all sides of the political debate, and everything in between, agreeing on a lot of stuff, to see Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about how their kids can't afford housing, that's a good thing. That's a step in the right direction because I love the post-duopoly term. I tried to call it post-partisan when it started, but I think post-duopoly is much more apt a description that Nick and those guys came up with over at RBN, because it kind of more accurately describes the monopoly that those two parties have. Because when I say post-partisan, there's only two parties, but there could be other parties. So it might not actually be. So it's not quite as descriptive as post-duopoly. So props to them for coming up, to Nick and the boys at RBN for coming up with that term. To take you guys out tonight with something mildly entertaining, let me see what I got in my bag tonight. Besides this, of course. What do I got in my bag tonight? I love to play this Max. It doesn't have to be music. What do we got? You know what? I'm going to take you guys out with this Iraq war salesman clip from Bill Moyers. No music tonight. Just a refresher on, maybe I'll throw some music up too. But this is a good way to end out because it's just this is the political issue that shaped me. And, it's good to take a trip down memory lane on these types of things every now and then. So thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Definitely appreciate you all, especially Truth, who's the homie. And I'll see you next time. I keep saying that I'm going to try to come on more often, but you know how life is. This is a lot of work, and I'm a one-man band, as I say often. Eventually, maybe I'll get to the point where I can hire some editors to help me churn out video clips more often. But, for now, this is what I'm doing. But I took your advice, Truth. I did actually put up a short the other day that did all right. You know, it got some views, but I also struggle with censorship. You know, like I know like TikTok fucking takes down every goddamn. If I scroll through my posts on TikTok, like every other video is a community standards violation. So I know YouTube, they don't do it that way. They just shadow ban you or like throttle your videos. Because I've even had videos that go up on YouTube that like do a certain amount of views and then they just stop. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know why that just cut out. Maybe because it has some messages in it you guys don't like, but I digress. We all know that that's the case. And you can break through it over time if you're consistent and you just keep putting out enough content that the algorithm picks you up. Because I haven't violated any of the actual terms on YouTube. I've been very careful about that. And I think that YouTube is a lot less censorious on certain things than they used to be. Anyway, here's Bill Moyers. Have a good night, y'all. Like and subscribe. Love you. Take good care.
Talk to some others in the media about their role in the run-up to the war. Judith Miller, who left the Times after becoming embroiled in a White House leak scandal, declined our request on legal grounds. The Times liberal hawk Thomas Friedman also said no. So did Bill Safire, who had predicted Iraq would now be leading the Arab world to democracy. President Bush recently awarded him the Medal of Freedom. The Washington Post's Charles Krauthammer also turned us down. So did Roger Ailes, the man in charge of Fox News. He declined because, an assistant told us, he's writing a book on how Fox has changed the face of American broadcasting and doesn't want to scoop himself. William Crystal led the march to Baghdad behind a battery of Washington microphones. He has not responded to any of our requests for an interview, but he still shows up on TV as an expert, most often on Fox News.
And he's got to begin to show progress in 3, 4, 5 months once the U.S. troops get in.
Being a pro-war pundit means never having to say you're sorry.
I mean, these were people who were laying out the blueprint for the war about how it was going to unfold, and it turns out couldn't have been more wrong every which way.
You have a president.
And it's astonishing to see them still on TV, invited on as experts in the region.
It's
Alex.
Yes, sir.
I've got the perfect answer for the ADL. They are going to have to listen up. What we did is we brought Netanyahu with us.
I mean, I'm in the twilight zone right now.
Netanyahu, what do you have to say? What do you have to say to Alex Jones right now, Nick Fuentes and Ye? It was bad. It was bad for Trump to meet with Nick and Ye. Okay. I had no idea your voice is going to sound like that, Netanyahu.
So you don't like Benjamin Netanyahu?
I just heard about this guy 2 weeks ago, so it's like the tweet, and I thought he had a funny name. I heard he's like really into like, he's like a super killer, and I could die for saying this, so in case this the last time you ever hear from me.
Well, look. I'm glad you guys are here.
Colluded with Russia. I wrote a book about it. Trump colluded with Russia. I wrote a book about it. Matt Taibbi is a bad person. Trump colluded with Russia. Trump colluded with Russia. Matt Taibbi is a bad person. I wrote a book about it. Matt Taibbi is bad. Jeff Girth. Trump colluded with Russia. I wrote a book about it. Trump colluded with Russia. I wrote a book about it. Matt Taibbi is a bad person. Trump colluded with Russia. Trump colluded with Russia. Matt Taibbi is a bad person.
That President Trump incited an erection.
His various cases of, he's got charges of inciting an erection.
Donald John Trump incited the erection.
They didn't like Donald Trump. They said he participated in an erection.
I always call it massive. Sometimes they say huge. really large